My name is Nathan Carter. I'm 42. And the day my brother publicly labeled me a courthouse custodian in front of a crowd of 300 was the same day I sent a serial murderer to face his final judgment. The morning began much like any other in my profession. I was up with coffee at 4:30 a.m., case documents laid out over my kitchen table, feeling the familiar heft of my issued Glock 19 at my side as I made a final review of witness statements. The Espinoza investigation had consumed a year and a half of my existence. That's 18 months of sleepless nights, fruitless leads, and the grim duty of watching families lay their daughters to rest while a predator roamed free. Today, within a crowded federal courtroom, I was set to finally secure Victor Espinoza in the place he deserved. But before that, I had to get through my niece's wedding reception. I wasn't blind to the irony of celebrating a new union while I was preparing to permanently strip someone of their liberty. My brother Richard was adamant that I be there, even though he knew the trial was concluding. "Family is the priority, Nathan," he had stated, using that patronizing tone I had come to despise. "Besides, it's not as if a courthouse custodian will be missed for a couple of hours." A courthouse custodian. That was the occupation he ascribed to me. It wasn't from ignorance. He was fully aware of my real job. Acknowledging the truth, however, would have meant admitting he had been wrong about me for the past 25 years. Growing up, Richard was the prodigy. Top grades, flawless attendance, and an acceptance letter from Yale at 17. I was the letdown. The son who barely scraped by to graduate high school, who joined the military instead of pursuing a degree, and who returned from the conflict in the Middle East with invisible scars and demons he refused to acknowledge. As he established his legal career in Chicago, I drifted between jobs, grappling with PTSD and the guilt of being the sole survivor when my squad's vehicle was hit by an IED near Fallujah. "Nathan will never make anything of himself," I once heard him tell our parents during a holiday visit. "He's damaged goods." That remark was made 12 years ago. 3 months later, I submitted my application to the Federal Law Enforcement Academy. The wedding reception was a perfect reflection of Richard's tastes. Costly, ostentatious, and engineered to broadcast his achievements. It featured crystal light fixtures, exotic floral arrangements, and a string ensemble providing ambient music, while Chicago's upper crust socialized with champagne and fine appetizers. I made my entrance in a simple dark suit. My hair was cut short. In the military style I'd kept for so many years it felt natural now. I maintained a clean-cut appearance with the kind of bearing that results from 2 decades of service in the military and federal government. "Well, look who decided to grace us with his presence," Richard declared as I stepped into the grand hall. He was the center of attention by the bar, flanked by his Yale Law peers and their equally distinguished partners. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my brother Nathan. He's employed at the courthouse." The manner in which he paused and grimaced slightly made it abundantly clear to all that I was the family's unfortunate case, the brother who hadn't managed to get his life together. "And what is it that you do there?" inquired a man in a perfectly tailored suit with a Rolex that was worth more than most people's cars. Before I could respond, Richard interjected. "Oh, the usual things, you know. General upkeep, cleaning, some basic security tasks. It's respectable work." He wasn't entirely fabricating the truth. I did frequent courthouses and was involved in security matters. But his description conjured the image of someone handling a mop and checking IDs, not a man who had dedicated the last 8 years to being a senior special agent in the Federal Behavioral Science Division. I remained silent. Experience had taught me that Richard reveled in confrontation, feeding on drama as if it were his lifeblood. So I offered a polite smile and made my way to the bar. Just 2 more hours, I thought to myself. Endure the toasts, offer my congratulations to the newlyweds, and then return to my actual responsibilities. But Richard had more in store. At dinner, he rose to deliver his best man speech. What began as accolades for the groom soon twisted into a critique, comparing the young man's successes with the shortcomings of various family members. "Stephen embodies the principles our family holds dear," Richard proclaimed, his voice resonating throughout the hall. "Diligence, intellect, success. He is a testament to the fact that achievement is not a matter of chance. It is the result of relentless effort and commitment. Unlike some who are happy to just drift through life." His gaze locked with mine from across the room. The implication was unmistakable. "I recall when Stephen told me he aimed to become a prosecutor," Richard went on. "It made me think of my own brother, who possessed such promise but never truly pushed himself. It's a genuine shame when an individual settles for a life of mediocrity rather than chasing their ambitions." A palpable discomfort settled over the guests. Even for Richard, this was exceptionally harsh. But his performance was not yet complete. "I mean, just look at Nathan over there," he said, indicating me with his champagne glass. Still unattached at 42, no significant career, living from one paycheck to the next. He sweeps floors at the federal courthouse and pretends it's a position of great importance. The hall fell into a hush. 250 pairs of eyes were on me as my brother systematically dismantled what he perceived to be my sorry existence. I could almost feel the waves of pity coming from the surrounding tables, mingled with a vicarious sense of shame for the man who had evidently failed at every significant life goal. I sat completely still, hands clasped on my lap, my face a mask of neutrality. This was trivial compared to confronting a serial killer in an interrogation suite. Richard lifted his glass. "So, a toast to Stephen, for demonstrating what can be achieved when one genuinely strives to build a life for themselves, instead of surrendering and taking whatever meager offerings come their way." The guests, though clearly uneasy, hesitantly raised their glasses, too well-mannered to object. Richard's smile was one of victory as he resumed his seat, evidently pleased that he had successfully asserted his dominance over me in front of his entire social circle. Just then my phone vibrated. It was a text from my partner. "Jury is back. Verdict in 20. Media mob outside. You set?" I glanced at the text, then at my watch, 7:47 p.m. The timing was impeccable. I rose from my chair, the sound of it scraping on the polished floor, drawing every eye in the room. I walked toward the front of the hall, where Richard's face shifted through a series of emotions. Bewilderment, then rage, and finally something akin to panic as I reached the microphone he had just used. "Pardon me," I said, my voice sharp and clear, cutting through the low hum of conversation. "I have an announcement to make." Richard jumped to his feet. "Nathan, what do you think you're doing? Sit down." I paid him no mind, turning instead to the assembled guests. "I must apologize for the interruption to this wonderful event, but I've just been informed that I am needed back at work. There has been a significant update on a case I've been involved with for the last 18 months. "Nathan," Richard hissed, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to overhear. "Don't make a fool of yourself. Just go quietly." I looked at him with the same smile I had deployed against countless criminals. Composed, self-assured, and deeply unsettling if you understood its implications. "As some of you might be aware," I said, "I am employed at the federal courthouse here in Chicago. What my brother neglected to mention is that I am a senior special agent with the FBI's Behavioral Science Division. For the past year and a half, my focus has been on tracking down a serial killer responsible for the deaths of 6 young women across 3 different states." The room became so quiet you could hear a pin drop. "This evening, I was notified that the jury has come to a decision in the case of the United States versus Victor Espinoza. I am required to be there when the verdict is read, to find out if we have managed to persuade 12 ordinary people that the individual who subjected those girls to torture and death should be imprisoned for the remainder of his days." Richard's complexion had turned a deathly pale. He clutched the table with such force that his knuckles whitened. "I understand this may be surprising to some of you," I stated, my gaze finding Richard's, "especially to those who were led to believe that my job involves sweeping floors." A wave of murmurs spread through the attendees. Some were already on their phones, likely searching my name or news of the Espinoza trial. Others were now looking at Richard, witnessing the collapse of the carefully crafted image he had presented. "The reality is, I've been with the Bureau for more than 8 years. I have a master's degree in forensic psychology from Northwestern, which I completed while on active duty after returning from my military service. I have served as the lead profiler in 14 major investigations, including the Lakefront Butcher, the Interstate Strangler, and the Cicero slayings. I have provided expert testimony to Congress on 2 separate occasions and have been honored with citations from 3 different FBI directors. I let that information settle. I am aware that some family members find it more convenient to tell people I'm a custodian. I have never bothered to correct them because, to be honest, I've been more concerned with apprehending murderers than with managing my public image. The room was filled with the sound of hushed, urgent conversations. All eyes were on Richard, who looked as if he wished the floor would swallow him whole. His Yale Law acquaintances were observing him with expressions that ranged from puzzled to utterly appalled. "The reason for this revelation," I announced, "is that in approximately 15 minutes, every major media outlet in the Midwest will be reporting the verdict of the Espinoza trial. My name and face will be on every newspaper and website from here to Minneapolis. This case has been a national story for several months. I'm certain many of you are familiar with it." I saw people furiously typing on their devices, seeking details about the trial. The Espinoza case had dominated headlines for weeks. Every aspect of the investigation, every shred of evidence, and every day in court had been scrutinized by the media. My name had appeared in news articles hundreds of times over the preceding 18 months. So when you see Special Agent Nathan Carter on the news tonight, being commended by the U.S. Attorney and the families of 6 murdered women, I ask you to recall that, according to my brother, I sweep floors for a living. The silence was profound. Richard looked physically ill. My phone buzzed once more. Another message. "Guilty on all counts. Death penalty. Press conference in 10. Where are you?" A genuine smile crossed my face. "Ladies and gentlemen, the jury has just found Victor Espinoza guilty on all counts. He has been sentenced to death. Or, justice has finally been served for 6 families, and a predator will never again harm an innocent person." The room erupted. Half the guests broke into applause, while the other half engaged in animated discussions. Several people started moving in my direction, likely to offer congratulations or ask about the case. But my attention was fixed on Richard. He remained by his table, motionless, like a man completely stunned. His perfect night, his platform to flaunt his success, had been utterly destroyed. Everyone in that room was now aware that he had spent the evening publicly degrading an FBI agent, his own brother, for sheer amusement. I made my way toward him, navigating through the crowd. When I reached his table, I leaned in and said in a low voice, "By the way, I earn $165,000 a year, not including federal benefits and a pension. I have a home in Lincoln Park and a cabin in Wisconsin. The reason I'm not married is that I've been too occupied with saving lives to invest in relationships that lack substance." I straightened up and addressed the table of his friends, who were all watching with rapt attention. "Richard has always been very proud of his little brother," I said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "He just likes to be discreet about my work, due to security concerns. I'm sure you understand." I looked at Richard one last time. "Thank you for a wonderful evening. I need to go and speak with the media now. It's something about how my unit's psychological profile was instrumental in solving the most significant serial killer investigation in Illinois history." I'm sure you'll catch it on the news." I headed for the exit, acknowledging the congratulations and handshakes from guests as I went. Behind me, I could hear Richard's voice, tight and strained, as he attempted to explain to his now dubious audience how he had somehow neglected to mention that his brother was a federal agent who had been in the national spotlight for over a year. As I walked out, my phone rang. "Agent Carter, it's Director Matthews. Exceptional work on the Espinoza case. The Attorney General wishes to express his personal thanks. Can you be at the field office in 30 minutes? I took one final look back at Richard. He was now sitting by himself at his table, his friends having suddenly found other conversations to join. His perfect night was shattered, his reputation demolished, and his smug sense of superiority had vanished. "I'm on my way, sir," I replied into the phone. Sometimes, the most effective form of vindication is to simply allow the truth to speak for itself. Stepping out into the Chicago night, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't because I had embarrassed Richard. That gave me no pleasure. It was because I had finally ceased to let another person dictate my self-worth. For too long, I had let his version of my story go unchallenged, partly for professional security reasons, and partly because I believed his view was irrelevant. But it did have an impact. Not because he was correct, but because each time I allowed him to belittle my work, I was complicit in that belittlement. Every time I kept quiet as he portrayed me as a failure, I was reinforcing the falsehood that my life's work-catching murderers, delivering justice to victims' families, and contributing to a safer world was somehow inadequate. My phone was alive with alerts as news agencies began to report the verdict. By morning, my face would be in every major newspaper, featured in stories about the Espinoza trial. The man Richard had dismissed as a courthouse custodian would be on the front page of the Chicago Tribune, celebrated as the federal agent who brought down one of the Midwest's most infamous serial killers. But the true triumph wasn't the public acknowledgement or the professional accolades. It was the moment I stopped giving any weight to Richard's opinion and started to remember who I truly am. I am Nathan Carter. I am 42 years old. I have committed my life to pursuing monsters and defending the innocent. I have confronted the most depraved aspects of human behavior and have been strengthened, not broken, by the experience. I have never settled for mediocrity, never accepted scraps, and never abandoned anything I believed in. And I have never, not once, swept a floor at the federal courthouse. As I drove toward the FBI field office, I understood that Richard had, in a way, done me a great service tonight. He had compelled me to stop being invisible, to stop diminishing myself to soothe his own insecurities, and to stop making excuses for being the person I was always meant to be. Ultimately, the truth always finds a way to reveal itself. It sometimes just requires the perfect moment, the right set of ears, and the one person who is finally ready to voice it. Tonight was that moment for me, and I had never felt so liberated.